Hi guys, welcome to the NewsNowNation channel. Today we are extremely excited because we are talking to Mr. Raghav Podar, who is, as his LinkedIn bio says, a thought leader. And we're going to talk to him about the education system in India, about his school, and how the youth of India is changing over the generation. So thank you so much, sir, for doing this. We're really excited to talk to you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Awesome. So just to start, can you tell me a little bit about how your academic background led to, becoming somebody led to you entering the education space, or was it something that was always on the cards? How did that happen?
I think it was always on the cards, considering I'm a fourth generation educationist. So the Podar Group, not many know that, was started in August 1927 in Santa Cruz. So my great-great-grandfather, Seth Anandilal Podar, along with Sri Madan Mohan Malviya, Jamnalal Bajaj, and founder President Mahatma Gandhi, started our first school in August 1927 in Santa Cruz of Bombay. If the viewers are familiar with Santa Cruz in Bombay, I'm telling you, in August 1927, it was very, very different. My grandfather would tell me that back then there would be forests and leopards roaming around Santa Cruz. How much times have changed, but so in some ways, education runs in my blood.
Yeah.
However, that being said, in college and further, for my further higher studies, when I went to America, I did not take up education as a subject. I took up economics and finance and marketing. I even worked for a few years in America, but home is where the heart is, and that's where the calling was. So I had to come back to India and took a deep dive into the education space somewhere around 2006, I think it was 2006 or 7. So proud to be in education for 15 years, because it's the only profession that truly you get to touch the lives of thousands and thousands of children, which no other profession can do.
Correct. No, you're right. And given that you come from a family of education, it's almost like it's almost a legacy of education that you come from. I want to ask you that how, I'm sure the idea and concepts of learning have been changing. They have been changing at an exponential pace over the past few years. So how, because you've not only seen it yourself for the past decade, over a decade, considering your parents and your grandparents were such an important part of it, how has that changed, and what do you think about the change in the education system?
So the education system across the world has transformed over the last 10 or 15 years. In fact, not even in the last 10, 15 years, the way the pandemic has hit us, there's no doubt in anyone's mind that digital transformation has changed the way education is being delivered in classrooms across the world. But more importantly, though, rather than focusing on just the change, I want to throw a spotlight and the focus on, is the purpose aligned with the way the trends are emerging? So if you see the trends that have emerged, that people are talking about virtual learning environments and AI, AR, virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality. So all of those transformations that are taking place, the Industrial Revolution 4.0, in this hot pursuit of all these technologies, have we missed the woods for the trees? Now, it's not a question of if, but when. At least some of these technologies will become mainstream in classes across the world. And the new normal that's emerging after this pandemic is going to be a hybrid one, a blended one, what is being called phygital. Mishri, any idea what phygital is? Phygital is the mix or the blend of physical and digital. That's what they say the new normal is going to emerge in education. But the fundamental question still lies in, are we serving the purpose of our 21st century citizens? Or are we just finding fancier ways of lesson delivery through e-pedagogues? Now, there's no better time than a crisis that forces us to grow and wakes us up from the slumber of rudimentary pedagogy. We can ill afford another education system that prepares students for and tests students in skills that they won't even require in the 21st century lifetimes.
Correct.
You spoke about my parents, my grandparents, and education was dominated by a culture of conformity, dominated by a culture of running behind marks, that obsession of marks. And that's what needs to change, because today's children don't need marks, don't need rote learning to get their marks.
Correct.
Unfortunately, instead of going after the 21st century skills, which are creativity, collaboration, communication, critical thinking, we're running behind rote learning and other such skills which are not going to stand our children in good stead.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're right. And, the Indian education system specifically, and even I'm a part of the Indian education system. I have gone through the um, nuances of the Indian education system. Um, it has been criticized for, being extremely focused on rote learning, one, and second, putting everybody on the same playing field when we come from such diverse, not only I would say like homes, but also in terms of our own learning abilities, in terms of our own strengths and weaknesses. Just because of the number of people that we are, there is so much diversity available. And somewhere I feel, and I would love your opinion on this as well, that the Indian education system is not able to account for this diversity. But how is it possible? How do you create um, this entire system of, learning to understand, a healthy attitude towards learning, a healthy attitude towards people around you, and accepting diversity by design in a school?
Right. You're absolutely right. You can't judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree.
Yeah.
Because if you do that, you're going to convince that fish that it's stupid.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of the Asian education systems, India included, does tend to do that. We try to pigeonhole students into boxes of conformity, whereas education is about creativity. So if you
Absolutely.
put a lid on a child's curiosity, which is essentially the building block of what develops the good learning or healthy habit of learning, if you put a lid on that curiosity by saying there's only one right answer. So what happens in classrooms across India and a lot of Asia, that if you give an answer that's not that one right answer, the teacher tells you keep quiet, keep quiet. That's not the right answer. And in an exam, you're supposed to know only that one right answer. What happens is that child who has the ability to think differently is being told that no, don't think differently. Go after this one right answer policy only because that's what's going to get you the marks. Learn it as per that. That system needs to transform from content mastery to competence mastery. The idea is to build those 21st century skills in our students of creativity, communication, collaboration, critical thinking, because today's kids already have Google on their fingertips. And with that, access to limitless information. By the time these kids grow up into their adult lives, they are going to be auto prompted with artificial intelligence and other technologies with the information that they'll require to complete the next task. And yet, here as a country, we're sitting and testing them and measuring them and valuing their abilities on the basis of that one right answer, on the basis of rote learning, memorization, regurgitation. It drastically needs to change. And I'm very happy to say that, and I'm optimistic about it, that the CBSC, the NEP, the National Education Policy, has actually put a highlight on these items and said, no, we're going to move away from just content mastery to application building. Yes, core concepts need to be known, but the ability to apply those concepts. Mishri, in the 21st century, the world economy will not reward you for how much you know, but for what you can do with what you know. Not for the amount of knowledge that you have, but for how you apply the knowledge that you have.
Absolutely. And I think, we have a lot of, I'm hopefully young parents watching us, young teachers watching us. And what you said is very simple, that information is not that value. Like, having a knowledge base of information in your brain is not valuable anymore, because that is available in everybody's phone and that is available online. But what makes it harder, because so much information is available, is how do you access this information in an appropriate manner, in a manner that gives you the most relevant information available and the most accurate information available. But I see a small gap here, because, and tell me how I feel like there is a logistical issue that comes in front, because teachers have not been brought up, the teachers who are teaching right now, they have not been brought up with this kind of technology. They have not been brought up with this kind of access to content, as you said. um, how does a teacher, then how does one train a teacher to teach in a generation that they were not raised in, where they lose that relatability and they almost reach the same playing field, if not a lower playing field than a student?
Absolutely. And that's the concept of unlearn and relearn. So a lot of the training or certified professional development that happens for teachers is centered around unlearning the styles that were what we were brought up with, maybe in the 70s, 80s, or 90s, and understand that the demands of today's children, the skills that they are going to require, are very different from the time of when we were growing up. So a lot of that goes in the training and professional development happens with the teachers is about unlearning and relearning. It's very important though to understand that this last 1 year, the pandemic time, people thought it's all a crisis, a lot of tragedy, a lot of adversity. Yes, there was adversity. Yes, there was crisis and tragedy. But adversity has the ability of eliciting talents that lay dormant inside us during prosperous times. We had teachers who didn't know, say teachers who were 50 plus, and they didn't have a clue. They were not tech savvy. They were not the kinds who would want to go to a tablet or a screen or a iPad and then start teaching from there. They have been forced into that position today because of the online classes. Those teachers who didn't know that they could possibly do that have now found out different facets of their pedagogy, which they did not know existed. So a lot of it is about self-discovery for teachers, even parents. The kind of parenting that has been required in the last 10 or 12 months is very different from what parents would send their child to school for 6-8 hours and then have that time to themselves. Now they are required to be there as a co-parenting, co-teaching and co-parenting. So the onus of responsibility has changed as only the teachers, as now with the teacher and the parent. So a lot of that actually we have broken through these glass ceilings that we thought were there that we could not go above. And that is why they say that a crisis is the best opportunity to grow. You should never waste a good crisis. And people talk about crisis as an opportunity. Yeah, of course it's an opportunity, but it's only an opportunity if you make use of it.
Yeah.
So hats off to the teachers who did make use of it during this time.
Absolutely, absolutely. Teachers have really been through hell and back through this pandemic, and that process has made them stronger, I would say. Teachers who were extremely uncomfortable with technology have been bullied into uh, because that's their profession, and that they have to get their message across through Zoom classes and through Google Meet classes and all of that. And you are right that a lot of paradigm shift has happened in the education space because of the pandemic. One place where I think that and this is my opinion, that digitally we will never be able to replace, and one place where I do believe that the digital space is lacking, and I don't think through this past year now that we've been suffering from the pandemic we've been able to tackle, is social development and the ability to create a sense of community online. How does a school, I believe a school has a really important role in the social development of a child, obviously, even though it's not taught in classroom, that's what develops us and that's what gives me the ability to talk to you today. How does one, in a pandemic when you don't meet people physically, you aren't taught physical boundaries, a lot of things that are inadvertently learned just by being physically close to each other, how is that transferred online, and how does aspects that weren't taught through presentation and blackboard, how are they transferred, how are they going to be transferred in a digital age?
Right. So that's definitely a challenge. And, we taught children in schools before the pandemic that sharing is caring. And now we're teaching them when they're rejoining school that, listen, if you care about your friend, don't share. Just keep your own stuff to yourself.
Yeah.
So the entire paradigm has changed. You're absolutely right. The socio-emotional learning, of course, is one of the casualties of online learning, the kind of socio-emotional learning in terms of building skills like collaboration, teamwork, resilience. I'll give you an example, a specific example. Let's say we get 8 children on an octagonal table, and now they have to make a project or something or on a worksheet, and each one has to take out their own crayon and do it. Now, one child pulls the crayon from another child. Let's talk about young children. The child whose crayon got pulled needs to know how to react to that. Those skills are being developed. Yes, you're right. The school doesn't physically go and test the student in that, but these are skills that are developed through having a team project or having a collaborative project. So these kinds of things do tend to have a detrimental effect when there is no in physical class schooling. However, that being said, there are a lot of things that technology has allowed children to have collaborative projects which we did not think could have been possible. For example, people said annual days. Annual days have to be cancelled this year. How are you going to have an annual day? You can't have 1,000, 2,000 people in an auditorium and have the children in front of the stage and all. How are you going to do it? And there are so many of our schools that came up with this idea, we're going to do a virtual annual day. So you actually have children getting into choreography, the direction, script, actually deciding, okay, fine, you're going to say this part of the script, then the camera is going to move to this child, then he responds to this with this reaction without knowing what was said to him. The amalgamation of that collaborative learning process, even through technology, has come out beautifully, where I would say that these kids in a few years would be ready to join, say, media houses and be part of those kind of industries. So there's a lot there to learn. Of course, though, there is also a detriment where socio-emotional learning, as I said, just being around children, being around other kids, you can't have that yet. So that is a casualty, but there are other facets of technology, of pedagogy, of learning, of skills that have been unopened with the children during this time.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. And I do see, in my nieces and nephews, I see ways of thinking, ways of innovation, the ability to create. I think, theory of constraints, the more constraints, sometimes the better the result. And the innovation has really, really flourished despite whatever has happened. What I also believe that may be required, because you said this word fidgetily was that?
Digital, yeah.
Which is really interesting, because I think the combination is extremely powerful and is the future. There is no two ways about it. But one thing that I think schools, and I wonder if it's some thought that has been going on in education circles, is whether there will be some sort of remedial learning for these things, for, skills like your social emotional development, your ability to interact with other people, public speaking, communication, social and cognitive development. Will there be any sort of remedial learning for something that was put on hold for so long?
Absolutely, 100% there is going to be remedial action from the time that we can restart, especially during the summer months. There's going to be remedial, because the thing is that different kids have progressed at different levels during this virtual learning environment time also. So there are some kids who have really immersed themselves and have gone very well. They've really shown better than what they were in physical class, especially the introverted kids, the reserved kids, maybe the kid who got bullied a little bit. Behind the screen, that child is coming out with his own confidence and all of that. But there are other children who necessarily need to be around other kids, the kinesthetic learners, the ones who want to sit and fidget around with things and be with kids, and that's how they learn. So there's going to be remedial classes, definitely. It all depends on which state allows the reopening of physical classes when. But we're looking at the summer break to use that time to really bring back the learning loss that might have occurred in some students, so that they're all at their A game when they rejoin after the summer break, which is about mid-June or early July.
Absolutely. And I think the summer break, hopefully, if things go well, fingers crossed, should be a good place for them to start. And I think you mentioned something about kinesthetic learners. And in case for our viewers who don't know, in education studies, the kind of learning, the way in which people learn has been defined into different categories. And I'm not aware of all of them, but I know that some people learn visually, some people learn so everybody learns in a variety of ways. So in a classroom of say 40 children, which is the kind of classroom that I went to growing up in, a very, very traditional school in Pune, I feel like the system sometimes, not the education system in general, but specifically my school maybe and my this thing, catered to only one type of learner sometimes. How can schools and how can parents, because they are working with children on an individual level, how can they cater and identify the kind of spirit and the kind of learning that their child flourishes in? And how can they do that? And how can schools do that in general? so systemically every kind of child flourishes.
Right. So children learn best on their feet and not on their seats. The different kind of learners that have been defined are the visual, auditory, some people say the readers, and the kinesthetic. Um, However, that being said, there are a lot of schools of thought that have gone too deep into visual, auditory, reader, and kinesthetic and really try to emphasize on that, overemphasize on that. Why I'd like to qualify that statement is that all children are a mixture of all of them. There is no child that is only a visual learner, or is not a reading learner, or is not an auditory learner, or is not a kinesthetic learner. The difference is in the amount of degree of how much a kinesthetic learner some child might be, and some might be more of a visual or a reader or an auditory learner. The best way is to ensure that let the child be comfortable at what they are best in. So, for example, there's a professor at the University of Illinois in the USA. His name is Professor Chuck Hillman, and you can find this study online as well. He's a neurologist, and he studies brain mapping and how children learn better. And he's done this study where he took a group of 40 students in a class, in a high school class, and he divided them into two groups, Group A and Group B. Group A were made to sit throughout their day in the class, and Group B were taken out for a 20-minute brisk walk. And then they were brought back, and MRI scans were done on their brains of both Group A and Group B. Now, what those MRI scans showed is that the level of activity on the child's brain in Group A was very little. So the activity levels were little blues and little bit greens. In the Group B, the ones who had done a 20-minute brisk walk, that's all, had massive amounts of activity in their brain. Reds, yellows, oranges, and some greens and blues. What it shows is, as parents, as adults, as teachers, we care so much. All of us live in this world of our mobile phones are the most important thing to us. And what's the last thing we do before sleeping? Make sure our mobile phone is charged. God forbid if you wake up and your phone is not charged, or you wake up with 1 or 2% or 5%, your mood starts badly.
Yeah.
We care so much about charging our phone's batteries. We have to care as much about charging our children's brain batteries. So recharging those brain batteries, getting children to just jump around, run, do aerobics, dance, play catch and cook, hide and seek, whatever it is. These are natural ways of the brain to recharge its batteries, because you get in that dose of chemicals. What is that dose? It's dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. The feel good, feel happy chemicals. Children, it has been proven again and again and again through studies that children learn best when they have happiness, when they're confident, when they like the teacher, and when they're curious. So instead of just going into a classroom and saying, okay, children, open your books to those so-and-so page, and why haven't you yet finished your last time's homework? What mood have you brought into that class? Why is that child going to want to learn, okay, children, today I will teach you how to write a 200-word essay? The child doesn't even know what essay means. So build purpose, build challenge, build curiosity in the child's brain. And the role of the educator in the 21st century is no more just of being that sage on the stage. You spoke about when we were in schools and a traditional school. You know, when we were in schools in the 80s and 90s, we had the teacher who would stand on a stage and blurt out these pearls of wisdom. And we would go and collect those pearls of wisdom and put them into our brains. Today's kids don't need teachers to be those sages on the stages, but to be guides on the side, not to be the gatekeepers of knowledge, not the security guard of knowledge, but to be a facilitator of learning. Technology can easily deliver content. It's only a human teacher that can spark that imagination, inquiry, and curiosity in a child's brain. And that's the role of the 21st century educator.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Educators need to come into their own as facilitators of learning, as you said. And as we move, I see it happening. I see it happening with teachers around me. And I'm an optimist too about how children are going to learn, how the concepts of learning and concepts of teaching are going to develop, for many now in between now and the next 10 years, where I predict, with the NEP coming in and with all these external policy shifts happening as well, I see a lot of progress on the cards. So good things are happening, and as long as we have educators like you in this space, I'm sure you know the ball is going to keep rolling upwards and onwards. So thank you so much, sir, for doing this. We had a great time talking to you. We hope that a lot of young teachers, educationists, parents are watching this and have taken notes from what you have said. And we hope every single child today gets access to quality education and is given the opportunity where they're not there's no lid placed upon them, like you said, but their curiosity is harnessed and their ambition is fostered. So thank you so much for doing this. We had a great time. Anything else you would like
Thank
to
you. Thank you so much, Mishri. It was my pleasure. And I would just like to end on, if I can, hashtag Gurudev Bhava. Teachers are like our gods. Let's respect them. Let us truly give them the reverence that they deserve, because they really work hard, the teachers. They are no less than COVID warriors. So hats off to all the teachers and educators watching there. Gurudev Bhava.
all right, thank you.